and welcome. My name is Michael Miller. This is a Michael Miller trademark training video out to you because you're watching. Thank you and welcome. It's meant for Michael Miller Pilates licensed affiliates, the Core New Core, my patrons, and anyone interested in surviving and thriving as a Pilates instructor. And there's plenty of trouble to get into today. So there's 5 things on the list. The first 3 of them are 21 days. The core is a grip at the hips. That's number 2. Number 3 is a rope and a whip. And number 4 is Bene Gesserits, Goldman Sachs, and Jesuits. Number 5 is, remember, it's a prestige game. So something that I heard along the way that I've always sort of thought made sense to me is that it takes 21 days to start a new habit or a new routine. To get something going takes 21 days. And then when you divide that by 3, you get to 7 days. You get to 3 weeks, right? 21 divided by 3 is 7. So you get 3 packages of 7 or 3 weeks to establish a routine. And perhaps I'm thinking about embracing a way of looking at something is as much something you do over the course of 21 days as actually performing some action or activity as the basis of the routine. Maybe too way out there. So let's get what's number 2 is way more specific. The core, anytime you hear anybody talk about the core, MMP takes that to mean the grip at the hips. And so MMP takes the core to be a grip at the hips, a muscular interaction, a muscular capability within the overall body at the hip area to make a rotational dynamic. And to the extent that we have a good grip there, it empowers us to make use of that grip throughout the rest of the body. Which takes me to number 3, a rope and a whip. The fun thing about visual aids is that they're engaging, and it's a way to make a point that you then use words to supplement because you've already made the point, at least visually, if not tactily as well. In any regard, to take a rope and set it up so that it's along the whole stage if you're doing a presentation. So you have a whole rope lined up, and then out of the bag you pull this, which is this huge long bullwhip, and you line it up so that one end of the rope and the small end of the whip all line up. And it's fascinating to just feel the energy that changes when you pull out the bullwhip. The front row of people immediately start looking for room behind them to get back from what? From a whip, which they evidently know can be painful if encountered. But you have a rope and a whip, and I grab the middle of the rope and I wiggle it, right? And I watch what happens. And I grab the middle of the whip and I watch what happens. And I grab the end of the rope, the end of the rope, and I watch what happens. And I grab the small end of the whip and I wiggle it and watch what happens. Now, of course, everybody in the audience goes, yes, but if you grab that whip by the other end, something different happens. And why is that? Well, for one thing, it's tapered, right? And the taper, you might also call that progressive, in that there's a progressive diminishment of the length, the width of the whip as it goes out to its point, right? And yet that diminishment comes from a place that's rigid and sturdy, the handle of the whip. And you can take it into showing the handle of the whip and some kind of control that you have or don't have with something other than this grip. This grip. Right? And so the quality of the grip determines how effectively you can use the whip. Now you know where I'm going with this, right? As a Pilates instructor, the whip is your spine, and the handle on your hand, your grip on the rigidity of the handle, is your grip at the hips. So this grip is what has a hold of the whip of your spine. And in the last broadcast, I was talking about rolling down and to where the lower back is flat, and the fact that that's sensational. And to me, that's also, if this is your spine, then getting your hips, getting to your flat back, and then continuing to roll. I know I hear half the world standing up that are in favor of neutral spine from the beginning throughout. But I'm much cruder than that in wanting to deliver a sensational differentiation that my student can feel. And then from that, control gotten from sensational differentiation come out to a higher degree of control, say in a neutral spine, which is less sensationally transparent, but stronger and towards the type of engagement you want throughout your body. A tuck, or coming from tucked in your hips, isn't an efficient grip at that end point of tension. I like the fact also that I could use my spring here. So if this is the hips and does this express the rotation of the hips in the trademark image of Michael Miller behind me? At the hips. Is it like this? Or is it like this? Hopefully visually you can make a distinction between which one is more like that, and it's in your ability to make this grip that gives you a handle on the whip of your spine. So that's what I'm talking about with my title about a rope and a whip, and appreciating the differentiation between two long things, but one is tapered from the standpoint of width and rigidity into a tool that a rope by itself can't be. And then if it feels appropriate and everybody's safe enough and there's no risk of injury to anybody other than myself, I do a very controlled wave of the whip to get a crack and fulfill the rifle over the fireplace mention to be used later, the bringing out of the whip to actually see it make a crack that you knew that was possible of, and your knowledge of what you thought it was truly was what it is. You give confirmation to a suspicion. So number 4, oh man, deep water. Bene Gesserits, Goldman Sachs, and Jesuits are 3 elite groups that come to mind. Bene Gesserits as a sisterhood within the novel Dune. Goldman Sachs as a partnership of financiers in America's Wall Street. And Jesuits as an order of Catholic priests that, from my primitive point of view, came into being to defend the papacy when Martin Luther expressed objections. And so to me that translates to defend the ideal within the church. So the papacy is a figurehead to the church, and to defend the church for whatever it was and is, for whatever it is. And you would need to talk to a Jesuit about what that is. My point is that all 3 of those groups are elite, even though one is fictional. And by an elite also has its essence of, or its presence of loyalty, which I'm sort of headed to in this, in that those groups, I think, show a tremendous loyalty to the group. And so, if we're talking about being a Pilates instructor, and then a teacher and a presenter, then if it's something you learn, I think one level of loyalty right away comes from your teacher, your loyalty to your teacher or teachers. Right? Those you claim as your teachers, you have some loyalty to because it's what you say you have because of them. And then if the teachers have a representation of the school, you have loyalty to the school that the teachers come from, and then loyalty to the tribe, if you will, or the lineage to which the school may or may not be aligned with, right? The groups get bigger: school, program, company. But at the point where you get involved in customers and then being part of or having a company, and to the extent that shareholders are involved, all of those things involve money. And what I'm pointing to is that in the pursuit of making money, thinking will be behind much of that pursuit, which will have good parts and bad parts to it. But I think it will definitely change the overall Pilates culture, because in the interest of making money, thinking will be behind that to see what it can do to maximize its investment. What MMP, or Michael Miller Pilates, would make the point of is that the most important thing is the experience, and the experience is personal. And so the loyalty to your own experience comes first, unless you have a loyalty to something that is in detriment to yourself, but as the custodian of the human being that you are, to whatever extent you're custodial, if you're going to survive, then to whatever extent you can partake in that effort to survive, it's custodial. And to that end, your loyalty is to yourself, or you don't survive. And where the advertising comes in from MMP is that MMP is a point of view that's an ideal point of view of Pilates. And as such, MMP supports the ideal in you, or supports you in expressing the ideal within you. Goes back to, is core new inside of me that I'm engaging in and that it's just within me, or is core new tension part of the way the world works, and when I engage in that knowingly, I'm merely embracing into the physics of the world that supports me and any other human that seeks to engage themselves that way. And we all do, knowingly or not, primitively or not, but the body has the capacity in it to engage in those biomechanics, and does, what I'm saying, to some extent, know it or not, like it or not. But the more you know it, as a Pilates instructor, what does core new tension give you? Two things. What you embrace into the physics of the world you're part of when you engage in core new tension, the engagement makes you lighter in space, because you're making a more uniform engagement of your musculature. is my contention or my claim that if you really want to develop your body uniformly, it's through core nutention that you get there. And that means unlocked knees and endpoints of tension at metatarsals. That means oppositional torsions through the limbs. That means the body engaging in the physics that it has evolved over thousands of years to be able to accomplish. So. Know what you know, I say all the time. And I'm talking about know what you know about a point of view that brings out the ideal within you, that gives you the ideal to reach for, whose efforts speak for themselves. What does it really mean to have a Pilates body? So, all right, I said what I had to say there. 5. Five is to survive as a Pilates instructor. Unless you have a totally isolated practice, there's some degree of surviving within the Pilates court, no matter how much you're present in it. And my reminder is that it's about prestige, not money. Because the people that kept Pilates going when there was no money in it to speak of were those people that had money to keep it going by supplementing the effort to keep it going, right? By funding it. And all those people and all that aristocracy is still in place that doesn't need any money at all to teach Pilates the way they wish and own studios and franchises of studios and companies and all kinds of expressions of Pilates that are what they are because their funding behind them says so, right? The presumption of legitimacy, the presumption of authority. And historically, Pilates has a history of that. And what I claim makes me the Copernicus, Einstein, Bruce Lee of Pilates is that I came along and said, yes, look at what Joe says in his book, and from that you can get to an experience through the pursuit of the ideal represented within his work, within his book. I was going to say work and book at the same time. Work. So, in the Pilates court, everybody has money, and a lot of it has nothing to do with Pilates other than the prestige within the history of the participation in the culture, which my note says is fertile ground for snobs because there's so much BS. I think that a point of view that Pilates has an essence of its own will continue to grow like all of the other points of view and the multiplyingness of different points of view. It has to be hard or incomprehensible or just not adaptable to see that, from my point of view, the culture will, with all that money, brings all that thinking, and all that thinking will want more of an explanation than what currently is available through the traditional aristocratic realm of things. Because the traditional aristocratic realm of things exists for what it is, by definition, without explanation, only inheritance. See? So, MMP would be classical, except that it acknowledges an ideal. So MMP is neoclassical. All you need is what's in Joe's book, let alone the rest of his work. But all you need was classical to get to the ideal. And in getting to the ideal, you have an authority in Pilates that comes directly to you from its creator. By way of experience and understanding, if you're interested in having the thinking part of Pilates be at least aware of how Pilates makes sense in the thinking realm of things. Because why? Because that's where they're going to press the money in order to tap into the essence. How far they can go in that will probably be just the opposite direction of what I want you to be aware of as a Pilates instructor. And that is, yes, Pilates is an ideal. There's a specific experience that you're in pursuit of, and in performing the choreography, achieve a high likelihood of surviving whatever comes next. Finding out that Pilates has an essence of its own, that there is something to Pilates that you may not already be aware of, or want to even entertain the notion that there could be something more to Pilates than what you already know it to be and hold sacred. It's sad. But if you want to survive as a Pilates instructor, I suggest you make the initial leap into recognizing that the core is a grip of the hips. Go beyond that to core new tension as a means of biodynamics that gives you more uniform engagement or leads you towards ideal uniform engagement. And along the way gives you a sensation of alignment between endpoints, because in the engagement of core new tension, it is an elongating or decompressive thing between the axes. Core new tension doesn't compress the axes between which it engages. I mean, maybe you could try to contort it to do that. But the notion, the whole thing is that core new tension elongates the distance, it lengthens the space between the axes. And that's what makes core new tension so amazingly beautiful, is that it can be demonstrated so directly. So she's surviving as a Pilates instructor. Recognize that Pilates is a fricassee, which is a stew comprised of different varieties of game. And that within that fricassee, each of those varieties is its own elite group as defined by whatever it is that defines them. I see myself as a member of the group pointing to Joe's work and saying, see the ideal, it's right there. The experience that comes off of it, can't miss it, can't mistake it. Everything else is derivative, meaning that it comes after. So much thinking wants to go into inflating the importance of more thinking or more knowledge, as though more knowledge can take the place of the necessity of observing, participating with thinking in the being to accomplish the complete coordination of all three. Know what you know. And for whatever level snobs may try to judge you for who you are and where you come from and how long you've been doing it and where you've been and, you know, your whole personal experience of things, right? That's the court. And as a snob, however you judge others because of who you are and what you know and what your view of Pilates is, if there is an ideal within the method, then it will defend itself, define itself, and as such, defend you and define you. What's nice is to get the idea and then to be able to be creative with it. And in my notes, Pilates, sets you, the MMP point of view sets you free because it gives you a sense of what it is and sets you free to explore with your understanding of that, your expression of that. Enjoy it while you can, because life can't live forever. Read between the lines and see behind the curtain. Evaluate points of view and evaluate reasons to be a snob. And there's all kinds of good reasons. I'm as bad a snob as anybody. Perhaps worse, or perhaps most comforted, because in coming from an ideal point of view, the only snobbery is in just having a different point of view than what everybody else evaluates their snobbery based on. Who you are, who you know, what you've been doing, how long you've been doing it, what else you've blended into it. Spurious suggestions of know what you know. Evaluate points of view. And then don't be afraid to really create a tier for support, menu items, where someone that appreciates your point of view can demonstrate their appreciation by the degree to which they support you. You have to direct your thinking, because if you don't, someone else surely is. Geist.